What's going on, everyone? Welcome back into MLS Digest. The quarterfinal stage or the conference semifinals of the MLS Cup playoffs just got wrapped up this past weekend, and the craziness continued as now we have 4 teams left. So let's get into what you may have missed. So as you can see, only 4 teams remain in this bracket. The action last weekend started off with the Hudson River Derby, both New York teams facing off, and the Red Bulls continued their improbable run, beating their crosstown rivals NYCFC after actually losing both regular season meetings to them in convincing fashion. But they have to continue their road trip. Being the 7th seed, it was very unlikely that they would host this next matchup, and that's the case here. They're going to have to go to Orlando. Orlando City beat Atlanta United in their matchup, ending Atlanta's fairytale run after Atlanta obviously pulled off the biggest upset in MLS Cup playoff history, beating Miami in that series comeback. And that actually brings Dax McCarty's long MLS career to a close. So all the best for him. But Atlanta in this offseason, it's a big one for them. They moved on from a couple DPs, signed Moranchuk to fill in that gap at the end of this season. And they have a lot of big decisions to make, including a coaching decision, as Rob Valentino as well, which we'll get into, was let go, won't be considered for the actual head coaching job after being this year's interim coach. Moving over to the West as well, really just not too much of a surprise from the Galaxy as they advanced to the Western Conference Final, just completely outclassed Minnesota in every aspect of that game. And they're actually going to host the Western Conference Final after a shock win by the Seattle Sounders on the road to LAFC. LAFC's been the Sounders' boogeyman for the past couple of seasons, and they just found a way. LAFC didn't look as threatening. The Sounders' defense has been their kind of what they've relied on all season, and they got the job done, and they scored a winner after it was a draw in regular time. They scored a winner later in extra time to seal the deal. So LA Galaxy has had some struggles with Sounders this season as well. They lost to them in Leagues Cup, I believe. And so sets up even though Galaxy is the home favorite here, sets up 2 conference finals that really could go either way, in all honesty. So we may have not gotten El Trafico, we may not have gotten Hell is Real, but still we could see really any one of these teams win the cup, I believe. But it will go through the West, depending on, it doesn't matter which West team advances, the Western team will host because of their point totals of the regular season. So Red Bulls or Orlando will have to go to either LA or Seattle for that MLS Cup final game. But before we get into the upcoming conference final games, let's just actually dive into each conference semifinal matchup we saw, what we learned, and anything else of note. So the first of those 4 conference semifinals was that Hudson River Derby, where Red Bulls just honestly took control from the start and didn't really look back. It was firstly just an unbelievable strike from Felipe Carballo to get it started about 15 minutes or so in. And it may have taken a deflection into that top left corner, but regardless, even a keeper of Matt Freese's quality was not going to save that. And then it was about a dozen minutes later where on a corner kick, after a deflection or two, the ball falls to Dante Van Zier, and everyone else in the box, or at least on NYCFC's side, is completely unaware, not sharp enough to clear the ball, and he just shoots it across net, takes a deflection off the right post, and Matt Freese is simply frozen once again. So we've seen this from Red Bulls a lot, or enough, in this playoff run so far. In that first game against the Crew, that's how they got it done, was on a corner kick that took a header or two in before the goal, and they've just been sharp on their set pieces on those second balls. And after that 2-0 lead, they just kind of relied on what they've kind of prided themselves on, which has been their defense. And NYCFC actually created the better of the chances per the statistics. It was 2.8 expected goals for them, just around 1 for Red Bulls. But Carlos Coronel, he's been literally standing on his head this entire run, and he outclassed Matt Freese in that regard. 6 saves for him, and even though NYCFC kept pushing, they just couldn't find their way through the Red Bulls. And yeah, I mean, what a time to, get your third time is the charm type of win after losing both regular season games and just honestly getting dominated on the pitch, in the score line in those 2 games. So they get their revenge, and it'll be tasting very sweet. And they have to turn around shortly and go down south to Orlando, where even though Orlando's been very, very solid at home, and that's how they got this top 4 seed, how they've hosted both their the first playoff series, and now the conference semifinal. They've been squeaking by as well on some uglier type of soccer. So that's kind of where Red Bulls have been thriving, and so it's really about who lands their punches in that one. But they're on their way possibly to a second MLS Cup final appearance. LAFC is out at the hands of Seattle Sounders of all teams, and that means both 1 seeds in these Cup playoffs are out before the conference final stage. I mean, who would have thought that, especially with how important home field advantage is for just MLS in general. And really, it was almost an even more improbable win by Seattle just based on the game script. LAFC took the lead right after halftime after some good link-up play, kind of a half counter, where Bogusz got the ball on the right side, did a move or two, and then Hollingshead kind of cut into the middle, top of the box, and he slots it past Stephen Fry. But then it was not even 10 minutes later where, Seattle had to kind of get out of their defensive shell, because they were down. And just honestly, an inexcusable error from Maxime Chanot, one of LAFC's center backs, where one of Seattle's players kind of gets a through ball on the right side of the box, or just outside the box. He kind of is falling away as he's crossing the ball across the ground. There's no one around Chanot. I don't know if he thought there, was more pressure on him to kind of clear the ball as fast as possible, or what, or if he just was off balance. But he tried to clear, and he just completely rifles it into the bottom right corner of his own net as if he's the striker. And so it's just a complete gift to Seattle, who, was probably going to get more and more threatening with there still being half an hour after that point, but, had to kind of expose themselves a little more and didn't even need much time to grab that equalizer. And that kind of deficit for them would have played into LAFC's kind of counter style of play. So that made things all even again, and that let Seattle get a little bit more comfortable. Then it went to extra time where it was on a corner with some failed half clearances that Jordan Morris gets kind of a half turn after getting a ball, leaking to him on the right side of the box, and he just rifles it on the half turn in the top right corner, and Lloris and the rest of LAFC are just completely stunned. And that was enough. Their main man, this guy has shown up in the big moments. And finally, they get the better of LAFC after about 2 years of just getting completely dominated by them, not even scoring for that matter in most of their matchups while in those losses. So it must feel very, very good. This is, revenge for not just this season's kind of 3 or 4 losses or whatever it was against them, but last season's playoffs where they lost at this same stage to LAFC at home. Just complete perfect revenge for the Sounders. And now they're going to have to go to another LA team in a week's time, or now, at the time of this recording in only a couple days. But they've kind of had an even set of results against the Galaxy. They lost on the road 1-0 early in the season, and then, completely honestly dominated them in Leagues Cup play at home. So I'm sure they like their chances. Galaxy, as much as they score, they give up a lot of chances as well. Even for a team like Seattle, they're going to be kind of licking their lips. And I think if Seattle can continue just priding themselves on their defensive work, then they could make it frustrating for Galaxy. It's really about, once again, I think, who scores that first goal. how comfortable or uncomfortable can they make the Galaxy early on. That'll set the tone. But for LAFC as well, just a complete failure. I mean, they expect to win some sort of championship, especially MLS Cup, every year, and they make the big signings ever since they've entered the league. They signed Giroud, who didn't score a single goal in MLS play in the regular season. In the playoffs, only scored that one header in Leagues Cup in the final, and can't really put the blame on one person or just one aspect of it. I think it's kind of on both sides. Giroud, it seems like he's kind of treating this a little bit kind of like he didn't really expect it to maybe be this difficult coming here. But at the same time, the system just doesn't suit him at all. He's not that type of striker to have the pace and the counterattacking type of style to link up in that kind of quick succession. So we've seen other kind of stars maybe struggle at first, and maybe this first kind of half season will get him a little bit more acclimated and ready for next season, and maybe he'll have a breakout year or whatever you want to call it in his second year after understanding the league a little more. But I think certainly he and the coaching staff have to work on some way to get him more comfortable with this type of style they run, because that's really not going to change especially as long as Boanga is there. But who knows, maybe Steve Cherundolo might be out of a job this offseason with some, with these types of failures. We'll see. And that might change the whole philosophy that the club goes about its tactics. So Sounders get their sweet revenge at the perfect moment. And, after some injuries, Rothrock, Nuhu out, they might be back and they might be fully healthy. And why not? Why not for anyone in these playoffs at this point? Orlando knocked off Atlanta, and now they're going to the conference final. They're going to host it in Orlando, where they've just been completely excellent. And it wasn't in the prettiest of ways. That hasn't really been their MO in these playoffs so far. But that's kind of been based on who they've played. That first series against Charlotte. Charlotte is a very stingy defensive team. Weren't many chances in that series whatsoever. And now just 1-0 here against Atlanta. Not many chances in this game either. 1.5 expected goals for Orlando, just 0.3 for Atlanta, and 0 shots on target, as a matter of fact, for Atlanta. So Orlando's defense really shut it down, made things really, really tight after scoring their goal. Not that they weren't going for the killer in that second half, but it's now 3 clean sheets in 4 playoff games so far for Orlando. 2 in that Charlotte series. One in the first game where they won, and then the second one where they lost on pens. That was a 0-0. And now here to advance to the conference finals. So they've been, not just squeaking by, but, credit to their defense for turning around for this whole team. And at home especially, they've been just completely dominant. And good for Enrique, who scored on a set piece, kind of a bit of a scrum in the box on a corner on a second chance. That snuck through Brad Guzan, and that was all it took. And for all the rest and all the kind of time Atlanta had to kind of get over that kind of emotional high against Miami, they really didn't look threatening whatsoever. So credit to Orlando on the other end. But they have a lot of questions to answer in this offseason. And now Orlando's going to host the Red Bulls, which should be another tight game. Both these defenses are looking as good as they have this season, and it's really going to be about who wants those kind of second chances, who's just going to make those effort plays, because that's kind of been the theme of these kind of, especially these underdogs advancing in the playoffs, and just who really wants it more. The playoffs, besides the Galaxy games, haven't really been high scoring. It's been very locked down. It's been very unsimilar to what we've seen in the regular season, and it's now Orlando's first conference final appearance, so they'll be looking to advance to their first MLS Cup final. And even though they won't be hosting it, they sure can get there by hosting the entire side of the Eastern Conference bracket. The LA Galaxy, man, what a team this is. 6-2 against Minnesota after 3 weeks off from their 2-0 sweep against Colorado. And they've now scored 15 goals in 3 playoff games. That's just absurd. They've been the story of these playoffs for sure. This attack looks completely unstoppable. And there were questions about, maybe rust after that long extended break. And what do? I think third or fourth fastest ever goal in MLS Cup playoff history. Ricky Puig with a curling outside of the boot ball from like midfield to Gabriel Peck on the right. He cuts it on his left and beats Dane St. Clair over his right hand, and it goes in. And that started off the momentum for the Galaxy, but it was actually short lived because Yeboah for Minnesota. I mean, man, what a signing he's been for them. He scored an absolute rocket from nothing, really, from almost basically right just inside the box on the left side, top left corner, and that made it 1-1 early. But then it was Jovic on a set piece soon enough, and then Paintsill got his own to make it 3-1 in the first half, and then late on in that first half, they drew a penalty, Minnesota, to make it 3-2. McCarthy actually guessed right on Yeboah. Yeboah does one of those kind of stutter step penalties, but he was off his line, and that made it be a re-kick where Yeboah actually took a real pen in this case, just a straight run up and kind of smashed it into the bottom left corner. But just to go into that, I think if you're gonna allow these like 2 or 3 stutter steps or whatever, and these pauses, then a goalkeeper should be able to maybe go off his line a little bit. Like, it's just ridiculous in every case. I hate these kinds of penalties in general. I hate when they just take it low in general. But if you're gonna allow that, then the goalkeeper cannot just be standing there and not kind of cheat a little bit, because then you have no momentum. You're completely frozen, and I just don't think that's right for the game. I mean, you've already gotten a penalty. Like, you're already going to the more extreme limits to kind of score this goal that should be, a free goal in all instances. So to me, it's just ridiculous. I think something has to be changed in terms of those rules, one way or the other. But regardless, Yeboah got his kind of retaken kick, and he made it 3-2 right before halftime. So it was still a game, even though Galaxy, the attack was looking like it was flying. They were certainly getting exposed on the other end, defensively. And as long as they're outscoring you, they're completely happy with that. They're going to live and die by that. And so far, it's been working in these playoffs. And right out of halftime, it was Gabriel Peck with just a blistering run, taking on 3 or 4 defenders in succession, and beating everyone to kind of put it cross post to the left to make it 4-2. And then from then, Minnesota really didn't have any answers. Galaxy just kind of played keep away a little bit, and in the end, they just padded their lead time and time again. And in the end, it was Jovic, Paintsill, and Peck each with a brace. I mean, how often do you see that? This attack, they just keep hunting for more goals. They're completely relentless, and I mean, it's just a joy to watch, especially in these playoffs that have been, obviously, usually the playoffs get a little bit more heated and tense, and maybe not as many clear-cut open chances. But this Galaxy team, it really doesn't almost matter who they play. They're going to carve you up, especially with Ricky Puig pulling the strings, the best player in this league, bar Messi for me. I mean, it's just ridiculous what he does on a game-to-game basis. And he's actually never recorded a goal contribution against the Sounders, who they're now going to host since he's joined the league and the Galaxy. So Sounders, if any team honestly left, are the ones that are going to, can potentially limit the damage in terms of limiting this LA Galaxy attack. But on the road, it's definitely going to be a little bit harder. There's certainly some key areas where Sounders have an advantage. They took advantage of those set pieces at home in that Leagues Cup game, and they definitely have, especially if Rothrock and Rusnak are now going to be healthy, then they definitely have some good chances to counter with Morris leading the charge. They have a lot of pace, they have a lot of energy already, and obviously in a game like this, everyone's going to be pumped up and ready to go. So I think this sets up a really good matchup of two kind of maybe contrasting styles. But I mean, even though we didn't get El Trafico, this is just about as good as we could have gotten in the Western Conference. So it's Orlando versus the Red Bulls in the East. For Orlando, it's their first time this far, as we've discussed. And for the Red Bulls, they've only made the Cup final actually just once in their history, and that was all the way back in 2008, where they lost to the Supporter Shield winning Columbus Crew. So it's been a long time coming for the Red Bulls as well. They're on this 15-year playoff streak, and they still have 0 cups to their name. So one of these teams is going to make the Cup final, and it's going to be a tight match. I think we're not going to shy away from or stray from what we've seen in the matches with these two teams in these playoffs. I think it's going to be more of the same. Both these teams have had some, rough, kind of styles of play, especially Orlando, the way they've been advancing. And for Red Bulls, it's really about how much can you go on the road continuously and continue getting results. That's going to be really, really tough of an ask. But it seems like they relish that kind of underdog status. And, it could really go either way. It's really about who's going to put in more effort, honestly, for those second balls. That's really been the theme here and the way each team has been scoring goals. Orlando's going to love spamming crosses in, so I'm sure Red Bulls are going to have a lot. They've already had a lot of experience dealing with that, playing against the Crew, and that's how they forced the Crew to try and beat them, and they didn't succeed there. So Orlando has to have kind of maybe a little bit something else in the tank to kind of unlock this Red Bulls defense at home. Otherwise, I think Red Bulls have another good shot at an upset here, maybe even forcing it to extra time. I think that's probably more likely the case, and maybe it could just be one goal separating these teams. I don't see too much separating them. I think the advantage in the just top tier quality has to lie with Red Bulls, being that they have Forsberg fully healthy. But one thing to watch out for is Sean Nealis, who has a concussion from the past game. So whether he goes or not is, I guess, up in the air. And that could be, could hurt them in terms of their familiarity in the back line and going on the road and all that. But honestly, I have no real clear-cut preference for who I'd rather see in the final. Both of the teams are going to have to travel to the West Coast no matter what for the final. So it's interesting. It's an interesting match. I think, man, it's a really one hard to call, but I'm gonna give Red Bull the edge. I think they are a little bit more comfortable in these tighter games, even though they're going to be on the road. I just don't see what else Orlando can do besides the kind of left to right kind of cross type of spamming. Someone's just going to have to get fortunate on a corner or some sort of set piece, and I think that's what's going to separate these two teams. But give me Red Bulls in extra time to make it to their second ever Cup final appearance. I know this is Orlando's first time here, but it may just be too much. And Oscar Pereira as well. That's why they've only made it this far just now for the first time, because he's continuously, maybe, whether it may be harsh to say or not, he's continuously maybe underachieved, even in higher, favorite type of positions. Like they are going to be a favorite in this match. He's continuously underwhelmed. So I think Red Bulls continue this magical run and make the Cup final. Over to the Western Conference final, where it's the Galaxy and the Sounders going toe-to-toe. These are the two most successful clubs in terms of MLS Cup championships in the West. LA Galaxy the most in the entire league, and Seattle with 2. They're tied with a couple other teams in the West with 2 championships, but still tied for second in the West. So 2 of the most successful teams in league history in terms of the Western Conference going at it here. And this year it's really been about who's been at home. LA Galaxy, like I talked about, got the better of them, of the Sounders 1-0 at home early in the season. Then in the Leagues Cup bracket, Sounders hosted, and it was already 2-0 inside, I think, 10 minutes. And then it ended 3-0. Sounders just getting a lead, and Galaxy couldn't really respond in that fashion. Actually, that was 3-1. They did get one late, but by that point, it was all over. And yeah, Galaxy, they haven't won a cup in the last decade. Last cup was in 2014. Sounders 2019, so a little bit more recent success. And besides last season, they've made the playoffs every year in their existence. So these have just been 2 of the class of the West. But for Galaxy, it's been a long time coming to be at this kind of top level and having these types of same realistic expectations of winning the cup. So for the league, I guess it's good to see them back here and, you know, back on top where they kind of belong. And they're going to be fully healthy. The home field advantage is means everything to them. That's going to make it hard for Seattle to kind of play their own game, but I think they're still going to be comfortable. I think they can really rely on their defense and make things difficult for the Galaxy to not get off to such a hot start. And if it, you know, continues to be 0-0 or something for longer stretches of this match, Seattle will definitely feel comfortable, and it's really about how long they can hold off the Galaxy, because it's hard to bet against them scoring one or even maybe two at home. Doesn't matter who they play, but if Seattle can pull some counter punches, maybe get the first goal, it's going to be a little bit shaky, and we're going to see this Galaxy defense really tested, because although their defender stepped up with some good kind of moments in that Minnesota game, you could see that, you know, they're ripe for the taking. This is really either going to go one of two ways. I think it's whether Galaxy can take it to them from the jump, or will Seattle continue playing like they did against LAFC, where, you know, you really limit things and just take your chances when they come. I don't think they're going to keep things too open. But at the same time, LA Galaxy still have not lost at home. And I think Seattle's best bet is taking this to penalties, you know, riding something like that out. I don't think it's going to be done in 90 minutes. And so that's the only way I see them coming out on top. I wouldn't be surprised by maybe some extra time, but these killer P's, man, I think Ricky Puig has a point to prove, and he's going to get his first goal contribution against the Sounders in his career here. And I think whether it be through extra time or not, I think Galaxy, they're probably not going to escape with a shutout. So if they want to advance, they have to score multiple goals. And I'm going to go for a 3-1 scoreline or something along those lines. I just, you know, you can't really, even though they win out at home this whole season, it hasn't always been shut down. So they're going to live and die by their style, and I'm going to continue to ride with them in these playoffs. I think they're the clear favorite left. They've looked pretty impenetrable. I think out of the three teams remaining, this is probably their hardest challenge they could get compared to one of the two they could face in the cup final if they do reach it. So they really got to get past this stage, and I think they're really set for a real good chance at MLS Cup. But I see them doing it. I see the killer P's cooking, and yeah, I think they're going to go back and get that chance at a Sixth Cup. Thanks for tuning in once again, everyone. I appreciate your support. These conference finals should be good ones. I got the Galaxy and the Red Bulls advancing. Let me know who you got down below in the comments. And make sure to look out in the next couple of days for another video dropping. I'm going to have recapping all the recent news and a lot of coaching changes around the league as off seasons continue to get started for the rest of the other teams in this league that aren't left standing. So thanks again for watching, guys, and I'll see you in the next one.